PHP. Is it a typo or is it a backdoor?
George, I understand that we have a little Git issue going on somewhere.
So it looks like that the PHP Git server that PHP developers use, right, to upload their code base and before they push it down to production, it looks like they found 2 commit statements in their development code. So it wasn't production, but it was in their dev code that were marked as I believe they were marked as like typo corrections, right? So they went in there and there were 2 statements made, modified the code. They were classified as typos. And it turns out that after some of the manual review processes that PHP has on the repo, discovered that these 2 commits were actually not just typos, but were a form of a backdoor that was placed in the code. And the people who, quote unquote, signed off on these commits, or who actually committed them, they used the names of 2 very famous PHP developers. So right away, the person reviewing the code was like, no way, like these 2 people would never make commits that would allow for backdoor access to any of our code, right? So the first thing they were trying to do was figure out how. So I guess at some point there was a compromise on a dev server within the PHP environment, right, on their PHP Git server. And so it looks like they placed a few comments in there, a few lines of code to probably not ruin the specifics of it. Stan could probably speak a little more to exactly how they were doing it, but it looks like they were looking at the header. I think it's the HTML header, but not to get too deep into the weeds. They did put a little string that they were looking for there, and they put zerodium in there. So the backdoor would occur. It would be looking for a string, right? Specifically zerodium. If it found that string, it would launch a function which would try to plant the backdoor to do some kind of RCE, right? Remote code execution. And apparently it's executing from the HTTP header in the user agent string, right? So right away when they reported this, zerodium, and this is my favorite part of this whole story, the fact that 2 people got in and made 2 commit statements, right, into the PHP code, which is not even fraud. So they, the PHP team was fine with it. They did actually make a drastic move where they decided they're going to shut down that server and they're going to push all of their code up to Git themselves. So they just decided we no longer want to maintain our Git repo. It's already, we discovered this via a manual search. We don't want to have this problem because who knows how long it's been in there, right? Who knows downstream how much of that has been pushed. They're pretty convinced this has never hit prod, so they're not worried about, any customers affected, but now they have to figure out what touched this specific code. So they've shut down that server and they've pushed it all to the official Git repo so they can maintain it. Because as we know, PHP is just always in the news to begin with. But my favorite part of this was Zerodium actually put out a tweet. So a member of the team of Zerodium put out a tweet when they saw this. And they said, cheers to the troll who put Zerodium into today's PHP Git commits. Obviously, we have nothing to do with this. And it's likely that the researcher who found this bug or exploit tried to sell it at some point and failed because nobody wanted it. So they just burned it for fun and, kind of threw Zerodium in there just to maybe piss them off or whatever. But I found that to be pretty interesting, and in today's world of supply chain exploits that we've been seeing, that's now becoming a huge phrase. Anytime you hear supply chain, everybody's on their feet. Yeah, I mean, it's not a huge thing, but I just figure it's something to maybe strike up some conversations on. And it's always fun to see PHP in the news. So I don't know what you guys have any insight on this.
I think it's kind of like pretty big deal because everyone now relies on open source tools and utilities in a big way. I mean, even if you buy a TV, sometimes the instruction manual for the TV is just a single page, but it comes with a little booklet that has the license, the like Linux license in it, and all the other stuff from all the modules that it comes with. And having something like this, right, be inserted into the code, because there's a lot of like almost every Linux OS, it comes with either a distribution or whatever, PHP. You can either get it or it's already pre-installed. So you can have, with if you were able to successfully modify the code, you could inject this backdoor into so many different pieces of equipment and so many different devices out there, even by accident. And it's amazing to me that it's just like a random, like, search or something, manual process that discovered this, because it could just as easily have not been discovered, through this thing. So there's a couple of issues here right away. Everyone is relying on open source code, but we're really dependent on the people who are the gatekeepers of the open source code to really, do that gatekeeping function and make sure that everything is okay with it, and that it's under active development and there's really people there who understand the code, understand what it means, understand that this here is a backdoor and we shouldn't allow it. So we're all inherently trusting that, which is it's a lot of trust. I'm very thankful to the gatekeepers out there for doing this work. And a lot of times they're volunteering, it's because they're passionate and things like that. But this is a big trust that's being placed inherently. And I think we maybe we forget that sometimes. And then the second thing is about like the whole manual piece of it, and maybe thinking about, in your own development process, how can you better do automated code scanning to discover these kinds of like latent issues? What can you do? So, if you learned something from this experience, what could have been done better next time through some kind of a scan or automated review of the code before it gets committed, and things like that.
I think your point's is super valid. Not just normal valid, but super valid, Stan, because you think about SolarWinds, of course, big news, right? So here's, you get into that software chain, supply chain, but, that's the challenge, I think, with open source is we really don't have a good SBOM, bill of materials, software bill of materials for open source. It's a lot of times people use open source, don't disclose it, don't identify it, and it's tough to find in code. And so when you do that and it's not disclosed, something like this could sneak in to a production environment. And I think it is a concern. I'm certainly a pro on using open source, but I don't think that it gets disclosed as much as it should. I find a lot of products using OpenSSL, for example, and never say that, hey, I use OpenSSL. And then, well, did you update the latest version to the latest version of OpenSSL? No. I said, well, you're 6 versions behind. And that's the type of thing that, even with PHP and other things, it could creep in and you just don't find it until years down the road.
Yeah. The other thing this reminds me of is that OpenSSL Heartbleed vulnerability a little bit. If you remember, that was like many years ago. But it was like a little bit of a typo in the code. It was like very subtle that whoever added that, and it was missed by the approver. So to me, that means that there is a class of adversaries out there who are actively trying to use this tactic to get into environments, and it's the supply chain compromise of software we all kind of use and probably inherently trust. Because I think most people wouldn't even think like, oh, I got to scan a PHP repo. Like they're not going to be like, oh, you just install whatever is there. It's on PHP website. That's not going to get hacked. Let's just put it in. But, this is a great example. And I'm really glad that this was detected and publicly disclosed also so everyone can be aware of it. But, how many times does that maybe not happen or it doesn't get caught? And, well, that just makes me worried that maybe I won't be able to sleep tonight. So maybe I'll go back. Maybe I'll go back to my world of everything is okay. Well,
Yeah.
yeah. Just being aware that, it is worrisome that there is this class of adversaries out there who are trying to do this, and we really have to be on the lookout for it. I think that's one of the key things for me, is they're not, whoever this is, they're not going to stop. They're going to keep trying.
And I think the comparison to SolarWinds is valid. It's very valid because, look, so many companies use SolarWinds, right? And at the same time, a lot of these companies were not keeping their patches up to date, even, and then they found out then they weren't. PHP is what? I mean, that statistic kind of changes, is like 79% of the internet, like they say, right? It's the majority of websites are built on it. How many companies, right, or how many people have websites built from PHP that don't bother updating the code, right, until something dramatic happens? So like you said, Stan, too, your TV can be built on that code, and these guys could drop a back door in, open a web shell, turn on your camera, and see what everybody's doing, right? So there. So if you thought you'd be able to sleep better tonight, I'm sure that's going to help.
I'm unplugging my TV.
Cover the camera and the microphone. Yeah. So it's pretty wild that a manual catch on this, and they probably only caught it because whoever dropped this in there used like a keyword like Zerodium. Maybe they're looking for that. Imagine if they would have left that out. Who knows? Use something else. But.